small, all across the state with the most up-to-date and complete guidance for Election Day and early voting. Now, this guidance is critical to keep us all on the same page, preserve the rights of Michiganders in every community, and to maintain a safe environment at every voting location across the state. We issued similar letters in the previous election cycles as well, and we do this so that law enforcement agencies can take the time now to familiarize themselves with election laws and to stand ready to enforce them as needed. I'd also like to encourage any members of the public concerned with their safety and rights to the voting process to review this letter outlining some key election polling place provisions. This year's letter highlights long-standing Michigan election laws, as well as guidance on the many new laws that took effect in 2024 to make voting even more convenient than ever. And it's up to law enforcement, from my office to our state police, to sheriff's departments and local agencies in every community, to preserve public safety and to help ensure a secure, legal voting environment this November. And it's our hope that this letter will help your local police departments to be aware of critical election statutes, how to assess violations, and how to resolve any number of possible incidents on Election Day and throughout the vote counting period. Trust that from the most local levels of government all the way up to the state, public officials and law enforcement agencies are working together to protect our elections and our voters on Election Day and in the weeks leading up to it. And this endeavor requires much of all of us. It's the responsibility of our citizens to not engage in unlawful behavior, the responsibility of dedicated and trained poll workers to promptly report allegations of illegal activity, and the support of our law enforcement community to be prepared to respond. There is value in understanding what is and what isn't legal activity on Election Day, and I hope this letter serves as a resource, not just for our officers, but for our citizens alike. So for more information on how to vote, where to vote, and what's on your ballot, please visit mi.gov/vote. And we've also launched a new website dedicated to detecting AI and misinformation that we encourage everyone to bookmark, use, and share. And it's linked on our department's election page at mi.gov/AG elections. For voters with concerns, the ACLU has established a nonpartisan election protection hotline staffed by attorneys to report concerns between now and Election Day. And you can call 866-ROUR-VOTE. And between now and Election Day, make sure, please, to use the many options available to vote, whether it's by absentee ballot, early voting, same-day registration, or just visiting the polls on Election Day. We hope everybody gets out there and participates in our incredible system of democracy.
Thank you. For questions, please, I ask that you raise your hand using the raise hand feature and we will call on you. We have a lot of people on this call, so I want to make sure we get to everyone in an orderly fashion.
And I am just going to let everybody know that we do have some of my amazing staff that are online with us today, including Danielle Hageman-Clark, who is our bureau chief over all our criminal divisions, as well as our investigative division. We also have Heather Meingast, who's on. She is our division chief for our elections division. So they may be chiming in here and there if there are questions that I can't answer or if they want to add something.
Great. We're going to start with Beth with Detroit News.
Hey.
Hi, Beth.
Hi, Attorney General. Thank you for taking these questions. I guess in light of what happened in 2020 at the TCF Center, now the Huntington Place, are you calling for, or would you encourage extra law enforcement to be present at Huntington this year?
Well, what I can tell you without being more specific is that obviously we're going to make sure that that doesn't occur again. And so there's been a lot of steps that have been taken, including steps that had already been taken for the 2022 election. And as you remember, we didn't have those issues in 2022. So I feel comfortable with what's been set up at this point. But I mean, between the Detroit Police Department and the county sheriff and the state police and our office and many others, I do feel as though the Detroit Counting Board is going to be safe and secure.
Thank you. Next, we have Victor Williams with WDIV.
Hi, Victor.
There, Attorney General, thank you so much for answering this question. Why was it important to get AI detection involved this time around?
Oh man, artificial intelligence, like once it came into being, it just exploded. And so unfortunately, we are seeing a lot of misinformation and disinformation that's being distributed through the use of artificial intelligence. And, as much as I think the public has grown skeptical and not just believing everything that you see, everything that you hear, I think it's been particularly worrisome when you see a candidate or a person who's talking and it appears as though they're saying one thing, and we know that it might be not them at all. It might be obviously generated from artificial intelligence. And I think that that's almost the scariest type of disinformation that there is. So we wanted people to be wary of it. We wanted to make sure that people had a resource to check to make sure that they could believe what they were saying, or alternatively, so that they're not always believing what they're saying. And again, we want voters to be informed, but we also want them to be cautious about what they're seeing and to go to reliable sources in order to corroborate that whatever you're hearing or seeing is actually factually accurate. And so those are some of the reasons, but is artificial intelligence a concern in terms of being, a purveyor of this misinformation? It certainly has become that way.
Thank you.
Great. Do we have any other questions? Beth at Detroit News again.
Hey, thank you for taking another question. There have been some sheriffs in the past who have in Michigan who have questioned the results of the election in 2020 and have been like instrumental in, I guess, leading some of the pushback on those results. I guess when you sent out letters either that year or this year, what kind of response do you get from law enforcement as a whole? Do you get some pushback from some law enforcement agencies?
So I have to say that I think what I've heard in response when we have set these out in years past really has been entirely positive. Sometimes we have more specific questions that people want to ask in relationship to the advice that we're giving. But for the most part, I don't remember hearing anybody say, I have a problem with your recommendation. And if you read through this, of course, really, we're not telling our law enforcement partners what they have to do. We're doing a few things. One, we're making them aware of just what the law is. We've had so many changes that we think it's important that you sort of have a one-stop shop where you can look for what is likely to be any of the laws that might be implicated that local law enforcement or county law enforcement or even the state police might see. But then these are just recommendations. And, for the most part, law enforcement can sort of take them or leave them and decide to handle things in a different way. Should they want to do that? Obviously, we're just trying to give them all the tools in an expansive toolkit that's available to assist them in the process of them enforcing the law during this, somewhat challenging time. I guess I would ask Danielle if you've heard anything different than what I have.
I was not able to take my video off, but what I will say is that, there we go. I have not had anybody reach out to me to complain about the guidance. My experience really has been, we get lots of different information, and law enforcement, I think, appreciates having an opportunity to get input from us, from their local agencies, because again, most of the response on election day is going to be at the local level. And so getting the information from us in advance, being able to have it, as well as the other resources that are provided around the state and even by our federal counterparts, I think having more is always better. And so I haven't had anybody complain about it. I've actually had folks reach out and ask, are you doing it again this year? And so it's just been positive on my side.
Yeah, same here.
Next, we have Mike Levine with ABC.
Hi, I was just wondering, with all the discussion of law enforcement, if you could describe what you see their role should be on election day.
Well, so, we want to make sure, that obviously we don't have police officers that are actually inside the polling precincts on election day. And there's a lot of reasons for that, some people like having, police officers that are present, but for many people, they find it to be sort of intimidating in nature. And so that's not something that we've ever had. But we do want to have police that are, local, that are on standby, that are, nearby in the vicinity, just in case there are any problems. And we've seen very, very few problems. And I will tell you, for all the preparations that we did in 2020, for election day, I should say, and for all the preparations that we did in 2022 for election day, we actually had very few incidents actually occur on election day. But again, we just want police to be as prepared as possible to respond, but again, not to be actually present there while individuals are voting. And also to make sure that, clerks, and there's been a lot of training with the local clerks, with the county clerks, so that they know how to handle a variety of different situations and when and if to contact the police and under what circumstances. I don't know if that's
Is that the training, I assume, was with law enforcement, them teaching them best practices type of thing, or?
Yeah, so the clerks have had their own trainings. Daniel, do you want to weigh in? Because I know that, of course, our department has been involved in this.
Yeah, so I think there have been a number of tabletop exercises where different groups, from the local level all the way up to the federal level, come together to talk about worst case scenarios. Like, if this happens, what is the response going to be from the local election officials, from local law enforcement, from local emergency managers, mayors, all the way up to, the FBI and other folks. And so those trainings really are preparation so that you're not starting to think about, well, what do we do now if we're confronted with something that happens on election day? Again, I think the best preparation, everybody wants to be as prepared as possible with the expectation that things will go smoothly. And in terms of law enforcement on election day, again, the expectation is that with so much early voting and absentee voting that you just don't see the sort of numbers that you used to see on in-person voting. But to have law enforcement available should something arise.
Thank you.
Next, we have Rick Pluta from Michigan Radio asking, what happens if local law enforcement doesn't follow this advice? Are there any ramifications?
I wouldn't say that they're, first of all, this advice is not set in stone, right? These are things that we recommend. Local law enforcement, they have autonomy and they're free to handle things in the way that they feel is best in terms of serving their community. And again, they know their local clerks and they work with them regularly. And the counties, they know their county clerks. So it's not as though what we provided is you must do this or you must do that. Obviously, they have to abide by the law. And so, we think that this is helpful in providing to them all of these statutes, especially all the new ones, because there are a lot. But, it's not as though we are, setting forth very specific requirements of what local police or county police or anybody else has to do or cannot do, except for anything that goes outside the bounds of the law.
All right. Oh, Jamie Cook, Macomb Daily. How does the 9 days of early voting impact your advice and how law enforcement will monitor voting?
I don't know that it changes things considerably, except for we want there to be an awareness during those 9 early days of voting that would be similar to, how they would respond in the event that something happened on election day. I mean, for all intents and purposes, it's not really different, right? Maybe more people come in on election day, but it's the same process, it's the same procedure. So we just want to make sure that, of course, law enforcement is aware and that they are ready during that time period. Obviously, there are some jurisdictions that have even more early voting that are starting even earlier than is required under state law. So, you know, we just want law enforcement to be ready during the course of that time period. But I don't think our advice changes much from early voting to actual election day. Again, Danielle, if I have missed anything, please feel free to correct me.
Nope, I think you got it.
All right.
All right. I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat.
I do want to add one thing, Kim, even though
Yeah.
you probably don't like when I do that. But I just want to say, listen, we have every expectation that election day is going to be safe and secure and that people should not have any concerns. And if you like voting on election day, by all means, vote on election day. But, you know, it doesn't hurt if you do have any concerns of any kind. Vote early. There's so many ways to do it, right? You know, request an absentee ballot and then turn that in. You know, we're recommending, of course, that people don't send in through the U.S. Postal Service their ballot. Anything that's to 2 weeks before the election. I don't know what that date specifically is. Kim, maybe you can tell me what that date is. But you know, otherwise, you can take that absentee ballot. You can drop it off at the clerk's office. You can take it to an early voting center. You can take it to a drop box. So there's so many other ways to be able to vote now that if you don't want to wait until election day because you have any of those concerns, then don't, you know, vote early. And I would encourage as many people to vote early as possible. But with that being said, I am not suggesting that because I think there's going to be any issues on election day. But just for anybody who has any concerns, there's no reason that you can't vote early now. I think it's great that we had that opportunity in Michigan.
October 22nd is 2 weeks before the election when we recommend people mail in their absentee ballots by, and if not, drop them off in the drop box. Okay, seeing no more questions in the chat or any more hands raised. Thank you all very much for your time today. We appreciate it. And as always, reach out to agpress@mi.gov if you guys have any further questions. Thank you.
Thank you.